Weencast, a Ween podcast with Shane and Rory.
Hey, what's up? This is Shane.
And this is Rory.
And this is Weencast. And we welcome you to a new episode. What's going on?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We're rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
And we got an extra special episode for you tonight.
Yeah, so this is something we've been talking about doing for a long time, and we've been wanting to sort of go over some of the Ween side projects for a while, and we decided to start in alphabetical order.
Yeah, so this is the start of an occasional series where we're going to be discussing and breaking down all the side projects, side gigs, and solo projects for all the band members.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start with Claude Coleman Jr.'s solo project, Amandla.
Amandla. Yeah, man.
Hell yes. I can't think of a better place to start, to be honest, because Amandla's the shit. That's the first thing I want to say. If anyone doesn't get a chance to get through this whole episode, Amandla's the shit. Go out and get the albums and listen to them because they're really good.
Oh my God. I know we've brought it up on the podcast a couple of times before, but in my opinion, I think these albums are a little overlooked. You know, you just don't hear a lot of talk about them. And if you haven't heard this stuff, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice. I mean, it's just really great shit. And I think it's really one of the longest running side projects of like the Ween world, because really this stuff kind of dates back to the late 80s.
Yeah, dude. Some of these songs go back to the 80s that he has on his albums.
Mm-hmm.
So Claude's been writing his own music for a really long time. And I would say of all the side or the solo projects, I mean, man, Amandla's right up there with the best of them.
Yes, sir.
I would say my other big favorite is probably the Freeman album, I think.
Yeah.
To me, like that's almost like another Ween album to me. But man, this is just top to bottom. This is just solid gold. So yeah, dude, I think we got to dive in and get rolling.
Totally.
Because it's so good. I can hardly wait.
Is your cutting board dried out, ugly, and lacking luster? Do your tables have too many water rings to count and need a fix? Are your kitchen utensils old and damaged? Maybe you just want to add a little bit of natural wood beauty to your home. Whatever it is, you can count on West Brandywine Woodworks to provide for you. We make high-quality, custom hardwood items for your home. From cutting boards to shelving, West Brandywine Woodworks has you covered. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. Mention Weencast when you order for 21% off. So give us a like and a follow, and don't forget to mention Weencast for 21% off your order. West Brandywine Woodworks. Custom simplicity for your home.
So, you know, why don't we start with giving a little bit of background? This isn't meant to be a biography of Claude or a biography. You know, it's not meant to be a biography of Claude. It's not meant to be a total history of everything. But it's probably useful to give a little bit of background information. You know, the history of the late 80s and the 90s and whatnot. And so something I'll say up front is, you know, getting ready for this podcast, certainly we've tried to do a lot of research. And it's always challenging to dig that far back and get clear answers to the questions we're looking for.
Yeah, man.
So that's been interesting. And Shane, you had, you know, mentioned as we were getting ready for this that, you know, with the Ween stuff, you know, Ween is really well documented. And you can go pretty far back. You know, you go on Brown Bass and you can get set lists.
Mm-hmm.
You can even get, I mean, not comprehensively every show from the early Ween era, but you can find recordings and videos and partial recordings of a lot of those early shows. But when you start going to these side projects,
mm-hmm.
it is scarce. It is scarce,
yeah, man,
to find shit about this stuff.
It's hard to not only find recordings of the shows, it's hard just to find documentation of like the tour dates and when the shows themselves were. I mean, there are some things that you can kind of piece together. You know, there's a lot of articles and things from the Amandla website that help and will tell you like, okay, this is when he was on tour for, you know, the support of the different records. But it's hard just to find like when the shows were, let alone like what the set lists were or like recordings of them.
Yeah. You know, and this would be something, you know, like on Brown, we always are hyping up Brown Bass. It's an amazing resource. It's so awesome. But it it has side projects for Aaron and Mickey, but it doesn't include stuff for, Amandla, which, makes sense. Claude is in Ween, but he's not, one of the two main dudes, right? But I would ask, very humbly make the request that, can we get that going? Can we try to get Amandla in the mix on there?
Yeah, man.
But yeah, dude, it's impossible to find tour dates. Occasionally you can find an article out there that will tell you like, oh, upcoming tour dates. They're not even necessarily all confirmed because some of them could have just fallen through. Who knows?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not even necessarily verified that they've happened. And you can go to jamband.com or Jambase, whatever the hell the websites are called, right? And there's like nothing there. There's like very little to go on. I've been fortunate to see Amandla twice live. And the one show they opened for Ween, so we know when that was, and that's documented. Mm-hmm. There's no set list, and I can't find a recording of it, but at least we know when it happened. The second one, infamously, I had to do some sleuthing for that one to even figure out when that was, and I finally found my poster and pieced it all together. I must have peeled the poster off the wall. But yeah, man, so it has been a challenge to put all this shit together. So we're going to do our best to give you a nice picture into Amandla, the music, the history, and the awesomeness.
Right on.
So Amandla gets its sort of genesis in the 80s, and Claude was in a band, Skunk.
Mm-hmm.
And that band, they formed in 1986, and I forget which year they disbanded, but they made it to around 1990, I think, or the early 90s. And they were produced by Andrew Weiss, who, of course, also famously produced Ween and worked with Ween. They still do. He still does, but in the early days, Andrew Weiss was very, very heavily involved. So Claude starts with Skunk, among other bands. He's done so much music, but there are a couple Skunk songs that are on the first Amandla album, Falling Alone. So the music for Amandla goes all the way back to that early Skunk era.
Right. So the second Skunk album is called Laid. And, it's actually a pretty cool record. The first one sort of like is what it is. You know what I mean? I'll admit that I haven't spent a whole lot of time listening to it.
Hey, you have it. Give yourself credit for that, dude. You got it on vinyl, right?
I do have it. Yes, I have the vinyl of both of them.
That's fucking awesome, man.
I mean, it's so funny because especially the first Skunk record, I mean, the notes and the thank yous and whatnot are almost the exact same thing as God, Ween, Satan. It's like all the same exact stuff. It's like not only is it on Twin Tone Records, but it's like Andrew Weiss produces it, and all of like the thank yous and shout outs and whatnot, they're all like the same shit. They're all the same dudes. But anyway, so on the second Skunk record, there are two songs that wind up on the first Amandla record, Falling Alone. And, just listening to Skunk, I mean, it's kind of one of those records where I didn't have it and, just kind of went back and bought it just for fun and listening to it. And it was like, hey, wait a minute. So they must have been Claude tracks that he thought were worthy enough to kind of bring back.
Yeah.
The first album, Falling Alone, it seems to me from doing like a little bit of the research, like it's almost sort of like a greatest hits of like the Claude stuff up until that point.
Yeah. So the albums, there's 3 Amandla albums. We've got Falling Alone, which came out in 2001. We've got Full Catastrophe, which comes out in 2006. And then we have the much more recent Laughing Hearts, which came out in 2018. And even though Falling Alone comes out in 2001, as you're saying, it's sort of like a best of Claude's material before that.
Mm-hmm.
He says that even though the band Amandla, which to be clear, Amandla is Claude, there's a good number of other musicians who help him record, play the bass on one song or play the saxophone, that kind of shit. And when he goes on tour for Amandla, he has musicians helping him, of course, touring musicians, but Amandla is Claude. So it's sort of synonymous. So when we say the band, it really means Claude. Although when he's playing live, there's obviously other people playing with him. And on the albums, not all the songs, some of the songs are 100% him, but many of the songs do have other musicians on them. But he says that the band basically forms in 1999, or the project, however you want to look at it. But even though it doesn't get started till 99, he says that at least half the songs were written by 1993.
Right.
He was just broke, couch surfing. In fact, famously, couch surfing at the Pod, where he basically got pulled in to be in Ween when Ween was just the Aaron and Mickey and a Dat.
Mm-hmm.
And then the suggestion, it was
Joe Kramer, I think.
Yeah, Kramer. It was Kramer who basically made the suggestion. Hey, this is cool and all, but take this to the next level and actually have
form a band.
Yeah, and Claude was chilling out on the sofa, and the rest is history. And so, so Claude was just couch surfing at the time, but writing a lot of music, so he didn't have any ability to record it. Now, fast forward to 1999, and at this point, he's been in Ween for several years and rocking. And he says in 1999, he actually was working at and had a friend who worked at Lenny Kravitz's studio in Hoboken, New Jersey. And he basically ended up getting free studio time at Kravitz's studio, which is pretty fucking cool.
That's the shit, man.
So are you going to go my way? Claude's like, yes, I am. So in fact, he I think actually used some of Kravitz's instruments. I don't know I think that was more or less on the sly, but going through boxes of gear at the studio to like get things together to use. I think he actually used some of Kravitz's equipment. And so it wasn't until 99 that he had this opportunity at this like amazing studio, that he finally was like, all right, Amandla, putting this shit together.
Well, you know what? And it's cool because when you hear like a story like that, it's like, hey, you know what? That makes a lot of sense because all three of the records sound great. They really do. I mean, even though it's Claude self-produced and, a side project thing and whatnot, these are not any lesser quality basically than, the majority of the Ween records, especially Falling Alone. Like, it sounds amazing.
I would say that quality-wise, it's as good as anything out there.
Yeah.
The music's clean. It's full of intent. You can tell that he works on these songs and practices them and works on them and really and fine-tunes them and he is not just an artist but also a craftsman.
Yeah, man.
I like to think of Claude as, and this isn't meant to demean anyone else in Ween, but I like to think of him as like the professional. And he is a consummate professional musician. So yeah, the music's the albums sound great and the music is awesome. But yeah, so he finally gets this studio space that he can work on it and he's putting this shit together. And so Amandla means power in the Zulu language. So that's where the name comes from, Amandla. And he first came across that on a Miles Davis album of the same name. So he's listening to Miles Davis. Claude's steeped in a lot of musical genres, which comes up. It's a recurring theme that all the albums have a lot of different variety on them, and he's pulling from a lot of sources. But in particular, and I don't think there's any surprise here. It's not this isn't a revelation, but a lot of like black music, I guess you can say, and a lot of funk and soul, and so there's no accident to me that he's like into jazz and Miles Davis and checking that out and seeing Amandla and immediately being interested and intrigued in that word and everything it encompasses. And so that becomes the name of his solo project.
Yeah, man. Well put.
Yeah. Interestingly, we actually saw Amandla open for Ween August 28th, 1999. So middle of 1999, we see Amandla open for Ween at the Electric Factory. And that was actually a tour finale for Ween that summer. And there was a lot of crazy shit going on at that show. Reverend P. Ill is guest in there. John Fishman's in the house. There's another guy that plays on a track, on a song. So like there's all sorts of cool shit going on. And then go figure, they got Amandla opening up for him.
And that was just like a pleasant surprise too. That just happened.
Yeah.
No one, I don't think anybody from the crowd anyway knew that, there was going to be another band, and it's just like Claude. And I remember him coming out and just being like, hey, what's up? Like, I'm Claude. I drum for Ween. We're just going to open the show. And I mean, I kind of remember them playing a solid, half hour or whatever
something
it was,
like that.
25 minutes, something like, yeah, it was like, hey, it's a nice surprise. Like, this is fucking cool,
Yeah, dude. I would love to, and maybe there's one out there, a recording of that night that includes Amandla in it, but I haven't found one yet. So if anyone out there knows of that, let us know.
Yeah, please hook us up.
Because I'd love to see a set list. I'd love to listen to it again, because I really don't have any memory of what they played. In fact, no one at that time would have really been much familiar with any of it, because if that was August of 99 and he was just forming Amandla that year and working in the studio, in Kravitz's studio, all of that would have been new.
Right.
And we looked at, and you just looked through the entire year on Brown Base, and Amandla doesn't open for Ween any other date.
Not that's documented anyway.
Yeah, not that it's documented. For all we know, that could have been the only Amandla tour date in 99. In fact, Claude ends up moving to London, which is kind of an interesting thing to think. He's touring with Ween almost, not throughout the whole year. People shouldn't make the mistake of thinking Ween ever toured like nonstop. It really isn't the case. More than but a couple years that Ween really toured super a lot. And so, but nevertheless, thinking of Claude living in London for a couple years in the midst of all of that is kind of wild. But it seems like they're probably, I would love to hear Claude. I would love to ask Claude that. And I would love to talk to him about it and see what he has to say. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the only Amandla tour date all year.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about because it's definitely possible.
So that kind of gets us up to the first album, Falling Alone. Sadly, I have no idea who played on the stage with Claude that night. So we don't have any information on that. But that takes us to the first album, Falling Alone. And so, Shane, do you want to take over and kind of talk a little bit about, maybe just some of the tracks or however you want to kind of go at it?
Sure, man. Well, what's really funny and really cool is the fact that each one of the Amandla albums is on a different record label. And I think in one of the, I'm pretty sure we asked him about it, and then there's another Claude interview where he just says like, yeah, I just make something up like each time.
Yeah, in fact, he said that to us in our interview. So everyone go ahead back and, we did interview Claude a few years ago, kind of a highlight of my life.
Yeah, man.
And yes, so he does talk about that. And he talks a lot about the early days of Skunk and getting to be with Ween and stuff. But anyway, I digress. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so this album is on Sounds of Black Sheep. That's the record label that Falling Alone is on. And it's a little bit more, I would say, in the vein of like a Ween album. It has a little bit of like the humor. There's a song, then there might be a little like interstitial, not necessarily skit, but like a little like comedy track or
like a spoken word.
Yes, but there's a couple of little like spoken word pieces.
So Falling Alone, and you just mentioned, it's kind of a little bit more in the Ween vein. It's got a lot of variety and some of that humor and goofiness with some of those spoken word tracks. Although none of the music I don't find is like sort of humorous or jokey or goofy.
No, great songs.
But what's interesting is, and this really places it in that era, there's a good number of people in the Ween world that are actually helping contribute on this album.
Totally.
And so on the Stony Brook radio track, for example, Claude is like pretending to be the DJ, kind of like sort of going through introducing different things and whatnot, like on a radio show. And then it goes through like someone almost turning through a dial on the radio and hearing clips of different songs. Mm-hmm. And one of the songs is an Instant Death song, right? Dave Drywitz's band. And then another one is Ween.
Polka Dot Tail, I think.
Yeah, you're right. So I believe it's Polka Dot Tail. And so one of the tracks on that Stony Brook radio, one of the radio, like couple seconds of radio is Ween. Mm-hmm. And so you also have Greg Frey helps Claude and Greg. Greg, of course, is famously Ween's manager.
Right.
And he helps with the recording and mixing of this album. And then also there's a track that Aaron does the lead vocal on.
Hell yeah.
So there's all kinds of Ween world influences on A Falling Alone.
Yeah, it's the most like Ween related of the three, for sure.
Which I think totally makes sense when you think about it coming out of music he wrote in the 90s.
Right. And of the time period.
That more formative era of Ween and him becoming part of the band. That was like an apex period. Like we talk a lot about 99-ish being almost like the beginning of like the peak period for Ween.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're talking, this album was actually released in 2001. I mean, you can't get any more steeped in that like Ween universe. I mean, you're talking, you got Ween, you got Sound of Urchin, Instant Death.
Totally.
Everybody is just coming up with different shit and helping each other and collaborating with each other.
Dude.
Right. Chris Hartford, Band of Changes. So all of those guys are just like on all of these, records.
Absolutely.
So this definitely is a good piece from that time period. Absolutely.
Yeah. But when you look at the liner notes and the thank yous, Reverend B. Ills thanked, Tomatoes thanked, Like all those people, like totally, it's like all those people are thanked, and like it really was a very collaborative time period where they all were just helping each other out. A lot of them like based in New Hope or in the very near vicinity, so they're all like together hanging out at, you know, farmhouses and shit, you know, like real hippie stuff, you know, like couch surfing and just being together and hanging out together and collaborating, like a true, it's almost like you know, like you think the 60s at Greenwich Village, you know, in the folk music scene and Dylan and shit, and this is like the Ween world and the New Hope in the late 90s.
Yeah, 90s and New Hope, basically, yeah.
You know, that may be a little bit audacious for me to mention Dylan, but nevertheless. So yeah, dude, it's and Falling Alone is a great album. You know, it's got
totally.
I love the variety it has.
I've loved this record, you know, for a long, long time. I can't remember which year it was that I actually got it. I mean, as soon as I found out that it was released, I had bought it. It was available on the Ween site for a long, long time. The actual track of Falling Alone is definitely a standout.
Yeah.
It's mainly like an acoustic track, and this is where Claude as a drummer, you know, the drums on this, you know, kind of starts off very light with bongos, and it just keeps like building. It has like an amazing build where it goes from the bongos to the actual drums, and it just hits, and it's just like, yeah, man.
I recall another time when water flowed with rhyme. The soul awakes to bloom and willfully resume, falling alone to the earth.
Totally.
Really fucking cool track.
Yeah, no doubt. One that I really like, there's a couple that I really like. Little Jimmy is, and you know, of course the whole Jimmy Wilson thing, and like, you know, Claude is sort of Jimmy Wilson in a way, you know, because he, you know, it's like, see little old Jimmy Wilson dance, and he plays the drums. And so I don't know if this is connected to that at all, but Little Jimmy is awesome. You got some great Claude falsetto. Little Jimmy.
In a group of strangers that were his friends.
And dude, it's so soulful and funky.
Yeah, it's very funky.
It's funny. So I, on a cross-country trip way back in the day, went to the Experience Music Project in Seattle, which is a pretty cool rock and roll music museum, basically, if for anyone that hasn't been out there. But it's not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's in Cleveland, but this is up in Seattle. And it does have a lot of focus on Seattle sound and Nirvana and all those kind of things. But
it's cool.
But nevertheless, one of my things that I got was a double disc funk like box, like not a box set, but a funk, like a best of funk double disc.
Nice. And
Little Jimmy could totally be you could throw that on there and people would think it was right out of like the early 70s or something.
Yeah.
Like absolutely fits in with that, like, Little Jimmy was all right. You know, like it's just a very funky, soulful old track. And so I just love that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one I really like is On a Ferry. It's got the bongos going on, and this is a slower track. You know, there's a lot of variety. So I already just mentioned that we got the old funk soulful funk. Falling Alone that's a little more of a rock tune. But On a Ferry is this like slower, just melodic thing. And there's a great line in there that I wrote down. And it's just these bongos going on. And it's just like, you know, it's smaller than life, smaller than death, smaller than all that I know, and the salt that I taste on my breath. Very good.
More than the lies that I live, and the salt I still taste on that breath. Where the
Yeah, Claude has a really cool way of writing where it just kind of like keeps going. You know what I mean? It's not just like one rhyme. It's like 2, 3 like pieces together.
Yes. Yeah. No, he's a great, don't underestimate his poetry.
Yeah, man.
And just really understated deepness, I guess. Like you could on first glance or first listen, you might not appreciate the sort of depths in the lyrics. And I would say the same. So go back to Little Jimmy, and I'm not going to try to sing any more of that and embarrass myself anymore. But it's like telling a story of a guy, Little Jimmy, doing his thing, and it's a great. It's really fun because it just sort of keeps going though. Like you said, like the lyrics kind of keep going. But yeah, dude, a lot of good stuff. I also liked I Think I Don't Mind. Is that the last song is that the last track?
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the ones that comes from the Skunk record.
Yeah, dude, that was an epiphany to me when you told me that came from the Skunk record, because that means the song's from like the late 80s.
Yeah, man.
And it's to me, it felt a lot like Prince, a very Prince-esque, but also I was getting hints of the Beatles in there. And so it's a very like a McCartney, the Beatles song, Oh Darling. Not that it's exactly like I Think I Don't Mind, but with McCartney hitting those high notes and yearning for that, person, oh darling,
Yeah. That's a great comparison.
And so I just really got, again, like a throwback, but a different kind of throwback. This is more of like a rock throwback versus like a funk. Although Prince is absolutely funky.
Oh yeah.
But feeling a little more of a rock throwback. But
I must blame myself to be. I'm not somebody trying to tell everybody about somebody who can save everybody. Take your places in front of you and
But realizing that was a Skunk song, it's like, man, dude, I guess I'm glad Skunk didn't make it, because then Claude probably wouldn't have joined Ween. But man, dude, I guess I kind of wish there, I guess I wish what could have been,
Things like that just work out for a reason,
Yeah,
You can't question fate,
totally.
So
yeah, not that we want to sit here and highlight every song, but I do want to say a little bit about them touring. So first off, we've already mentioned that we don't really have any record of verifying tour dates. And for all we know, Amandla may have only ever even played a few dozen shows, like in their whole history.
Right.
Because I don't think that because first off, he started in 99. His most recent is 2018. That is 19 years, right? It's not like he's been touring as Amandla that whole time. I'm pretty sure he really only mostly just does Amandla tours in connection with the albums. And so I did find an old review from that time period from Scott Caffrey on jambands.com, and he actually saw a show in September of 2001, and that's actually right after 9/11. And so the show, I want to say it was in Hoboken, somewhere in New Jersey, but not too far from 9/11. Maybe it was even closer. I don't know exactly where it was. But at any rate, just to mention that the guitarist was dubbed Baby Hendrix.
Nice.
And so I guess apparently the dude had a big afro as well. But that's literally all that I know about the Amandla tour for Falling Alone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some more information out there, but there again, it's kind of like, this stuff may have been documented, but never really made it online. You know what I mean? So it's tough when you're going back to that, that like time period. And, the shows were probably in a lot of just like bars and small clubs and stuff like that. So it's like, who thought to write this shit down?
Yeah, totally. So anyway, let's move on to Amandla's second album, Full Catastrophe, and that was released in 2006.
Yeah, so basically this is on Stonebrook Records, which again is just kind of made up by Claude. But I love the fact that he actually goes through the trouble of doing something like that, because I think he just said like, yeah, like that's just part of the fun. And it's like, yeah, man, like fucking A right.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to have a label, you got to have a record label. Totally. And if you don't, just make one up, So I love it. Interesting little tidbit is Falling Alone comes in the standard jewel case, and then by the time Full Catastrophe comes out, it's just like a cardboard slipcase.
Oh, yeah, that move.
And unfortunately, neither one of those records has been put out on vinyl. Hint, hint.
Come on, Claude, put them out on vinyl. So this is the first, there's only 3 of them. So this is the album that comes out post-accident. And
right.
So if you don't know, Claude was involved in a really terrible car accident in 2002. And he's still, to this day, dealing with effects from that. But the months right after that were really difficult and challenging for him. And we're actually going to be, not to tip our hat, but in a couple months we'll be addressing that in future episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, the Full Catastrophe is actually, the title is inspired from the accident, and the production and work on this was really a cathartic and therapeutic, a source of therapy for Claude. Now, it is worth mentioning that many of the songs predate the accident, so I think most of them do. And so it's not like you can listen to all the songs and be like, oh man, I can hear him talking about it, because that's not exactly how it works.
Right.
But nevertheless, thematically, the way the album sets up and the flow of it and the feeling of it is very it's therapeutic. It really is. It's a very chill, loungy vibe to the album. There's a lot of great flow to it. So let me talk a little bit about where some of the inspiration comes from. So the album's title is inspired by the words of Zorba the Greek and meditation teachings of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn for living with stress caused by pain and illness. During the recovery, I believe his sister gave him a copy of Kabat-Zinn, this book from this doctor about how to deal with pain and stress in your life. So I'll quote some of that. This is from Claude. He says, Kabat-Zinn teaches us lessons on acceptance as well as courage with grace. We need to accept all the crap along with the positive. It's all the essence of the living experience that makes being alive so precious. In studying his teachings, my already pretty high threshold of pain and discomfort has become limitless. The struggles, tribulations, and trials of being alive are exactly the same as life's joys, gifts, accomplishments, and with this understanding comes a reduction of the soaring stress in the body that the pain causes, which is great and without rest. He says, I haven't had a day without pain in 5 years. And at this point, this is a while ago, but I'm pretty sure he's still dealing with issues. I don't know exactly the extent at this point, but perhaps for the rest of my life, I'll be dealing with it. But in accepting and processing the pain, I've still found tremendous enjoyment in everything I do.
Wow, man.
Yeah, dude, that's deep. And so that's a little bit of background where the title Full Catastrophe comes from. And that gives you some insight into how Claude was trying to deal with his recovery, and then how this album became very cathartic in getting him his recovery is not over, but in getting him to continue to evolve through his recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's amazing, dude. I mean, I give the guy so much credit, to come back from he suffered brain damage and paralysis, etc., partial paralysis and things. And so it's amazing to me to see someone with so much spirit, find a way to overcome that and continue being an amazing musician, both for Ween.
Yeah, man. And the fact that he was playing music later that same year, when his accident happens in August and he's back basically by the end of the year, it's amazing, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
dude.
The guy is just a machine and just a absolute inspiration.
Totally.
And this record has a lot of different things going on to it as well. It doesn't really have any of the humor. It feels more of just like a Claude solo record. It's not so much steeped in that Ween family as Falling Alone. You had written down, it feels very loungy, funky. It has a lot more of a 70s kind of feel to it, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other quotes that Rory had found, Claude said, there's some Curtis Mayfield type stuff in there and some Sabbathy stuff, some folky, dirty Fleetwood Mac, and he calls it soul, folky, rock, psychedelia. And I'm like, that's pretty cool, man. And that's very fitting of this record.
Absolutely. This record, it doesn't necessarily, there is variety in the music, but the variety is all stuffed into each song. So it's not one's a heavy metal song, one's a funk song, one's a rock song, it's not exactly that. I mean, there is some variety. I don't mean to understate it, but It's more like each song just has all of that in it a little bit. And yeah, dude, it's a great listen. I find that the individual songs don't stand out quite as much for me. I find that this is a great album just to kind of put on and listen to, and you really get, it's meditative. And this comes back to the therapy and the cathartic nature of it for Claude. It's a very meditative album for me.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
I was just going to say an interesting thing I found in the liner notes. He says he's like, all songs written, performed, produced, recorded, and survived by Claude Coleman Jr. And that's such a cool, like he's a survivor, and so many of the songs predate the accident. Mm-hmm. So in order for him to put those songs out to the world for us to get, he had to survive. He had to overcome that.
Totally, man.
Yeah, man.
I would say a standout for this one would be Stoned Love. It's very 70s. It almost feels like a disco kind of track. Something from like a Bee Gees record or something like that. Has a real like funky guitar, like waka 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 waka. Stoned out of your love. Stoned out of your love. Stoned. The coast, destinations out of time. Sacrifice tomorrow forever in the sky. Cool hook, and there again, he's doing the falsetto.
Yeah.
You
got to.
Yeah, man, why not? Hip into Sleeper, that might be where he considers the Sabbathy kind of stuff. That's a little bit more of like a rock.
Yeah.
And the just like cool like bass and guitar riffs. About this record, and then I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but maybe this is just me projecting a bit, but the second two Amandla albums, they're not so like drum heavy. I feel like by this time Claude's definitely getting more into being a guitarist and being a bassist and playing the different instruments. Mm-hmm. Whereas, with Falling Alone, it's a little bit more like drum driven. Again, maybe that's just in my imagination because I know him as a drummer, but the guitar and bass of Full Catastrophe are just amazing.
Yeah, dude. No, and I'm with you. There's definitely an evolution that at least feels like it's happening from Falling Alone to Full Catastrophe to Laughing Hearts, where it feels like he's maturing and growing, and
yeah,
coming out, like finding where he fits and evolving as a musician. And so this one is more, it's not as drum focused.
Yeah.
And so it just shows that, he's a multi-instrumentalist. He's not just a drummer. And there's still a good number of people helping him on this one. Here and there, some of the songs are 100% him. About half the songs are 100% him. And then the other ones have a couple people here and there helping out. So people are still helping out, but it's totally, you just see that evolution.
Another one of the tracks is the last one, which is called Back Down. And I absolutely love the fact that on this record and on Laughing Hearts, the next record, the final track is listed as a bonus track. I mean, that's just, again, it's like, why? Why not?
It's a bonus track.
It's a bonus track. You gotta, why not? Both songs have a very like classic rock sound to them, like a 50s or early 60s style feel to them. Just a little bit more on the simple side and just amazing guitar. And I just love it. I just love it. Totally. I'm talking Back Down. Back
little bit more to say about Full Catastrophe in that time period. Every time he goes on tour, it's basically a different backing band. And, it's just like they're not, he's Amandla and he's just getting like his buddies and other great musicians to help him out. And so on this tour, at least for some of it, you had Dan Green on bass, Peter Kaufman on drums, and Francis Pisani on guitar. Everyone's from Jersey City. That was the Full Catastrophe tour. Now, I want to take a couple minutes and talk about that I actually got to see them on this tour, or I think it must have been for this tour, because I actually saw them in Eugene in February of 2007. And so, if I may, go on a little sidebar, but I don't remember a lot about the music that night, and I can't find any recordings or anything of it, but basically, my wife and I and a couple of our friends were just going out to shoot pool one night. It was a Sunday. I'm pretty sure it was a Sunday. In fact, I know it was a Sunday. And we're just going out to shoot pool at Lucky's. And it's the bar that's just a couple blocks from where I was living at the time. So we just walked on over. Hey, let's shoot some pool, drink a couple beers. And on one of the trips to the bathroom, I saw a poster on the wall. It said Amandla, and I'm like, whoa, that's tonight. And so we were like, dude, we have to stick around. So we ended up like hanging out at this bar like all day, all night. And then sure enough, Claude comes through the door, And I'm too much of a pussy to like actually come up to him. At any rate, he was under the weather. He was sick. And so his voice wasn't really that good that night. It was pretty rough, as I recall. But my friend Cassie, it was funny because she was trying to be really sweet. And she gets out this bag of tea, like a tea bag, out of her pocket that wasn't in a package or anything. So it was just like absorbing the dirt and the sweat in her pant pocket. And she like gets up to him. She's like, I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Would you like some tea? So that was pretty fucking hilarious.
Didn't you guys have to go? Didn't you like call in for like tea? Like, didn't you tell her or call her from the bar and just be like, yo, Claude's sick. Like, you got to bring tea.
No, she just had tea in her pocket.
So she just had it with her. She just had it with her anyway?
I'd have to follow up with her about why she carries tea in her pocket. That's not in a package. That's just like a tea bag. And let's be clear, like not, each tea bag has like a sealable, a little packet, a little paper packet that you open up and then the tea bag's inside it.
Yeah.
But not this time. So he declined, which is probably the smart move. But it was just a great time. Lucky's is an old school bar in Eugene. They got an old school like bar top in there, and it's one of the like old quote unquote oldest like businesses or restaurant bars in Eugene. So it's pretty cool little place. And for some reason I remember Claude playing on the drums, even though everywhere I read it talks about how when he's doing Amandla he doesn't do the drums. He's usually doing the vocals and the guitar. But I seem to remember him playing drums that night. I maybe just not remembering it correctly because as a drummer, that's such a big part of who he's always been to me. But maybe I'm misremembering it, so I don't know for sure. But I sort of remember him on the drums. But yeah, dude, that was a fun show. And I don't, I wasn't that familiar with his solo work at the time, so it's not like we were singing along to the songs. It's not like he played any Ween songs. He was doing his own thing. But we just had a lot of fun. That's cool, man. And so you can, I tell that story in more detail on Patreon if you want to check that out. I have a little mini episode where I go into more detail about that evening.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, maybe you're right on both accounts. Like maybe he was playing drums because one of the guys just couldn't make it to the show. And Claude's like, all right, we'll just do it with, drum and bass and I'll just do drum and vocal or what, you know what I mean? Like He probably just will shift into like a different thing depending on who's going to play the show that night. He probably is real, just, show must go on kind of guy,
It's totally possible. And it also occurs to me, maybe if he was sick, maybe playing the drums is easier. I don't know. That's just conjecture. But yeah, I think you're probably a little closer to the truth. Maybe on the other hand, maybe I'm just not remembering it correctly. But anyhow, it was just amazing to get to see Claude in Amandla, just 2 blocks from my home, all the way on the West Coast, completely randomly.
Totally awesome, dude.
And then the last tidbit to say about that before we move on is that the poster actually infamously, or can it be infamous when it's not a very well-known band? At any rate, they actually got the name wrong. And on the poster, they called them Amandla.
Yeah. And on the poster, there's an A after the D.
Yes, the poster has it Amandala.
Ridiculous.
So because of that, I know, man. It's fucking ridiculous. So because of that, all these years, until recently, I had the wrong spelling.
Oh. So now we're getting somewhere. So in 2013, Claude started a Indiegogo to raise money for his new project, which would wind up being Laughing Hearts. So through Indiegogo, he is said to have raised about $11,000 through miscellaneous Q&As on Reddit and stuff like that. You can go back and you can find those threads on Reddit, just like some cool questions and things that just, hey, ask me anything. I think that he called it. So pretty cool stuff.
I think he if I remember correctly, he talks a little bit about the breakup, because this is 2013, so this is actually just not too much after the breakup in 2011, right? So that's like fresh on people's minds. So they're actually asking him about the breakup, and so I don't want to sit here and kind of rehash all of that. But it's an awesome Reddit to check out and easy to find. Just Google search it. And then he also talks about another thing that I thought, Shane, was really informative was he was kind of talking about the difference between a full band member versus an independent contractor. Mm-hmm. Because I guess technically for Ween, he is an independent contractor. And so that's what he was saying back in 2013 was, sometimes people may get the misconception that he has all this money or something, like, oh, Ween sold all these. It's easy for like a jerkwad fan to just be like, Ween sold all these albums and went on all these tours. How can he have a lot of money? And so he was pointing out that, at this point it had been, 2 years since he played, several years really since he played with Ween. And then also Eagles of Death Metal is another band that he plays with. And basically just expressing like, yeah, dude, I don't have a lot of money. And I know I mentioned this before, that Claude is like a consummate couch surfer.
Right. And if those bands aren't like playing live shows, like he doesn't make any money.
Yeah.
Ultimately is the real reality of it.
Totally.
He needed to raise some money to make his new record.
And I think it's worth it, dude, because the record's great. Thanks to all the fans who contributed to Claude on Indiegogo, So thank you, because you helped create a great album.
Yeah, right on. Well, I have a little mini story about getting this one, and this is the only one of the three that was pressed on vinyl and is still available on vinyl. I think it was Father's Day of 2020. And I actually didn't even know that this record had come out. So this record was released in 2018. I think I just happened to go onto the website, which is amandlanet.net, and see, oh, there's a new Claude record. Like, oh, cool. And it was getting to be Father's Day, or Father's Day was coming up. And I think my wife was like, hey, is there anything you want for Father's Day? And I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, there's that new Claude album. So that was kind of it. I didn't really think anything of it. And then I think Father's Day may have even come and gone, and she said something about it like, well, I ordered the Claude record for you, so that'll be on its way. It just hasn't come yet, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then, I can't remember exactly the time frame, but a few more weeks like went by. So it was like going on like a month or maybe even longer. And my wife just said like, hey, that Claude record never came. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I forgot all about it. So I was like, well, send an email to the website and see what they say. So she did. And, she didn't say anything bad. She basically just said like, hey, I ordered the latest Amandla record, on such and such date or whatever. And I never received it. So a few days went by, and then she got an email back from Claude himself.
Nice.
Where basically he just said like, oh, I'm sorry, like I've just been so busy, and I'm a one-man band here doing all my own merch, and wrote this really nice email back, and we were like, oh, it's totally fine, like take your time, blah blah blah, and of course I'm like, oh my god, like you got Claude, like tell him I love him, and like all that kind of stuff. So he was just like, oh, don't worry, I'll hook you up. So what finally did come was 2 copies of the album. So I have 2.
Oh, I didn't know you had 2 copies.
Oh, here we go. Shakedown.
That's great, dude.
Rory's about to shake me down for this one. So I have 2 copies of the record and a couple of Ween pins. So like, I guess pins that, I don't know if they were, fan made or whatever that people had sent to him, but there was a couple of pins stuck in with the record as well. I'm like, hell yeah.
That's great, dude.
So I'm just going to say, I know my copy of Laughing Hearts came directly from Claude. And if you don't have it, order one. And I'm assuming yours will as well.
Yeah, dude, that's a great little story.
Well, the record itself, the only thing is you can tell that it's a real vinyl record and everything. But I mean, it might be, made on the cheap a little bit. And I think Claude, when we talked to him himself, even just said like, yeah, you just give it to like a record company. They just make it for you. It would be nice if it had a little bit more like liner notes and like a little bit more to it. It's basically just like a jacket and then a generic like inner sleeve and a black vinyl.
Totally.
There's no like inner sleeve to it or anything like that. There's nothing really on the record sleeve about who plays on the record besides him, So it's cool, but it's like, he could have spent a little bit more time like making sure like everyone got shout outs and stuff on it, but maybe the CD has a little bit more to it, like the CD booklet. I don't know. I don't have it.
Yeah, that was one of the things in preparing for this podcast was that the other 2 albums, we have a lot of great information on all the musicians who helped out on the tracks. But then to have this one, suddenly it's his most current one, his most recent album. And then it was kind of hard to figure out, to find that information. We got a little bit and we'll share that as it's relevant to the songs we talk about. But yeah, it's a bummer because, I wanted to be able to kind of talk about a little bit about, who are the people playing on this? So we did get a little bit of that information, which we'll get to in a couple minutes.
Marshall Hotel Records, which I don't know where that comes from or, what that reference is, but apparently that's just another cool made up record label.
So one of the things about the Laughing Hearts is that this is the album of sort of Claude moving down to Asheville and all of that. And so Claude's a Rolling Stone. He's lived in a lot of places and moving around, and so he finally lands on Asheville as just like this really cool city that really fits his personality and fits him, and he decides he's going to get down there. And so one of the things that I feel like is totally a theme or a part of the music on this album is a little bit of this southern, little countrified, a little bluegrassy kind of folksy vibe.
Totally, man.
And the opening track, Follow What Brings You, absolutely fits the bill. It opens up with a little kind of folksy guitar, kind of really feels like an Asheville type of song. And Claude talks about how this song's about traveling and kind of, in particular, sort of arriving down south, but also just, the song's like, follow what brings you here, And so it's such a neat vibe to think. I didn't even know what Claude had said about the song, and I'm already in my head thinking like, this guy moves around a lot, and this song is all about moving and finding that place. Follow what brings you here. You know what I mean? And
yeah, man.
Part of that to me is also about, if something's going to bring you somewhere, don't leave it behind. Like, follow it. It's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah.
That if you have a certain vibe that you're looking for, like, and you're going to that place, like, bring that with you. Like, that becomes a part of you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally, man.
I felt like that's a really great track because the vibe totally fits with Claude, with where he is. Since I have the information, we got Kirkwood, kind of a cool name if that's real. Kirkwood on guitar on that one, by the way. And then the next song I wanted to just mention or talk about a little bit is Laughing Hearts, which is obviously the title track. And I don't know how common usually, I feel like title tracks are usually the first song, or maybe not, but at any rate, this is track 3. And Laughing Hearts just has this really nice groove. Part of it has a George Harrison guitar sound.
Yeah, man.
And I don't want to do a little like mouth guitar because I'll embarrass myself, But I'm totally thinking some of that, like, like I just did it, like, and that was a terrible rendition. But you take some George Harrison, All Things Must Pass, and you listen to that solo album, and it totally has. I don't know if it's a slide guitar or it just kind of sounds a little bit like a slide guitar, but it totally has that like George Harrison sound to that guitar, that solo sound, and I thought that's really cool.
And take a run round the battlefield and see who gets lonely. Pockets are empty like see who's got the only gift to receive and own who you are. Move then to settle with laughing hearts.
It's this the title is a reference to a Charles Bukowski poem, so just FYI out there for all the nerds. And I'll just share a quick Claude quote because this is the title track, right? So I think it speaks a lot to the whole the album as a whole. And Claude says, first off, let me back up and say that we're getting a lot of these quotes and information from an article from Where You At, and the music critic is Finn Turnbull is the guy who interviewed Claude for this. And so I want to make sure I give this guy a lot of credit because he gets a lot of great information from Claude. It's a really awesome interview. So you should go to the website and check that out.
Yeah, and there's at least a little bit of something about each one of the songs from
totally.
Laughing Hearts in that article. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so Claude says about Laughing Hearts, he says, it's everything that everyone's life should be. You should be a proud, laughing heart, full of sunshine and embracing everything coming your way. That's the tune that defines the record and kind of defines the making of it. I think that's wonderful. I think this laughing heart, I love that idea that you should be a proud, laughing heart, full of sunshine, embracing everything coming your way. You know?
Yeah, man.
We don't have time in this world for hate. We don't have time for that shit, So let's just try to have fun and embrace shit and make the best of things.
Fuck yeah.
I also think just, last thought on this song is I think that also speaks a lot to Claude, post-accident, overcoming or working through and dealing with the long-term issues surrounding that and starting that next chapter of his life and the second part of his life or whatnot. And I think it just speaks to his positive attitude, and that's awesome. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. There's no shortage of different sounds and different instruments used on this album.
Totally.
There's kind of like a little bit of everything. There's, obviously, guitar, bass, and drum and everything like that. But you can definitely hear like banjo and, like you said, like slide guitar and just like really cool, different little things about it as well.
Totally.
One of the tracks that I like a lot is Stay Awake. And that starts off with like some really cool bass. And it's a little bit more of like a rocking tune.
Yeah, that's like a grungy, rocking like bass groove. Yeah.
Yeah, it has a little bit more of like a dirty, like grungy kind of feel to it. And it has a really cool hook. And, me just listening to it, just thought it was mainly about being down south because he says, the night is warm like an open oven, so stay awake with me.
6 maybe dozen. No one's counting, no one's fussing. The night is warm like an open oven, so stay awake with me.
Thinking like, man, it really puts you in like a hot, like summer night.
Yeah, totally.
kind of place. And then reading the article where Claude breaks down the songs, it was about a friend of his, a woman that he said that he dated, who had an insatiable sexual appetite. And it's like, ooh la la, but really fucking cool track and just an awesome chorus, and gets stuck in my head.
Yeah, it's funny because you hear what his description, but I think what you said is equally valid about the heat, not necessarily from the south, but like I think you can have the dual meaning. It's one of, it can be about a hot, humid night, but also can be about a hot, humid bedroom,
Oh yeah.
you know, or wherever you're choosing, you know, right? You don't have to be in a bedroom. All right, TMI.
It's also another good example of, I mean, we talked about in some of the previous records. He has a cool way of doing not just one like rhyme in a chorus, but like a few like put together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where like the writing just kind of keeps like going like 2-3 different little sections to it, like 2-3 little pieces to it. So that's another good example of that in that song.
Totally.
And then I have to give a shout out again to the quote unquote bonus track, because this is the third album and it's the second one to have a bonus track. The Full Catastrophe does as well, and the last song on Laughing Hearts is the same.
Yeah, dude. No, and the quick thing about that is he just likes to throw bonus tracks in there. And we were wondering about like what makes it a bonus track, but apparently it's because he really did just kind of throw it in there at the last minute. Like he put it together and threw it down, you know, just to kind of add it in there. So it is sort of a bonus track in the sense of it wasn't like a thought for the entire album until the end. It wasn't like
Right.
It wasn't like there's a regular version of this album out there and now this is like the bonus one, you know.
Yeah, this particular song is called I Get Around, and this is, I think, even more of a sort of like 50s like rockabilly tune than the last track on Full Catastrophe. I mean, this is just straight up like old, you know, classic rock style, you know, very simple, but really cool. And this actually features a guitar solo by Joe Kramer.
Yeah, occasional, he plays with Dean Ween Group on occasion, and I believe, doesn't he play, or has in the past played, done the Invitational at John and Peters in New Hope?
Yeah, and I mean, if it's the same dude, it's the same guy who had mentioned, you know, who was the shimmy disc guy, and I think it's all the same dude.
Oh, you know what? I wasn't even thinking of that. Of course, shimmy disc.
I mean, the guy's
That's
like a legend. It's like, man, he just keeps popping up.
That's funny. I totally wasn't even thinking about that part of it. Damn.
In the notes in this article that we're referring to, Claude gives Joe a shout out and basically says he's one of the greatest guitarists he's ever known. It's like, damn, man, like that guy's a fucking legend.
That's cool. And the solo does shred. It's really cool. And it's totally like a rockabilly tune, and that's how Claude describes it as well. There's a great line in the song. Well, first off, it's just got this great groove. You know, so it's a really fun song, like old school rock and roll. Anyway, there's a great line in the song, and I'll just read it, but it says, "I get around like a boy on a bike. I get around like the devil on the bayou." And I love that line because it totally invokes that old like southern rockabilly like sense, you know, like a devil on the bayou.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the next line is, "I keep the road to my wheels," which is a great inversion of the idea of the wheel on the road. Keep the road to my wheels. I don't fuck with my rock and roll. So that's just like, it's awesome.
Amen.
It's like roots. It's roots, you know, and it's a great sort of homage or not homage or whatever, but it's a great sort of just looking back at the roots of rock kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you should never fuck with your rock and roll.
No, dude. Don't rock and roll. Don't fuck with you. Don't fuck with it. You know.
Yeah, but it really is another great album.
Yeah, dude. It's got a lot of variety, which is a hallmark of Claude. One of the things I really like about this album is when you juxtapose it with the other two and you look at them in order, you really do see like the evolution of Claude.
Sure.
You know, and all the albums are great. So it's not like they keep, you know, oh, the first one's okay and they keep getting better and better and this one's the greatest. I'm actually a little on the fence. I'm not, to me, I don't know if Falling Alone, I don't know which one's better, Falling Alone or Laughing Hearts, and I put Full Catastrophe a little bit behind the other two if I was like trying to come up with a hierarchy. But it's not like, oh, suddenly they all get better and better over time, but you can feel the evolution of him because in Falling Alone, there's a lot more. I feel like the Ween world and the Ween people are part of it and helping it, and that comes from that early late 90s, early 2000s era. But then this is him, becoming, and this is started writing during the Ween breakup, and he releases it after Ween comes back, but Ween's not come back to like full touring. It's not like they're doing 50 shows a year or more. I mean, especially the first couple years, I want to say the first couple years they came back, it was pretty spotty how many shows Ween was doing. So this is Claude on his own. Like Ween broke up, and Claude's like, I'm going to start working on putting together an album. And so it really does see the evolution. And then also part of that evolution is him finding out where he fits and going to Asheville and being like, this is where I belong,
Yep.
So
yeah, I think that Full Catastrophe and Laughing Hearts are very personal. You know what I mean? And especially with this one, since there is that really nice article where he's talking about the songs, he talks about moving down south and also the fact that, that was after his divorce. When you read his breakdown of those songs, that comes up a lot too. So it's very personal stuff.
Yeah. Well, and we do know that he is he remarried now, or is it just a partner? I'm not sure the exact status, but I know that he's got a little kid. I do want to share, and this is a quote from Finn Turnbull. He's the music critic that interviewed him for Where You At? Because I feel like what he says here really talks a lot about all of Claude's music, but also Laughing Hearts. And so I feel like this is a great way to like kind of summarize everything that we're talking about. So Turnbull says, the music he writes for Amandla is impossible not to like, because there's something there for everyone. The style ranges from hard, distorted rock to heartfelt blues, R&B, funk, even pop, country, and rockabilly. Laughing Hearts is a perfect example as it contains all of the above. This album would be appropriate to listen to at any time in any mood. Sweet, memorable lyrics accompany the most refreshing songs. Claude's third album is a masterpiece. The production is outstanding, which is to no surprise because Claude performed, recorded, and engineered almost everything himself. In addition to the fantastic instrumentation, Claude also has an amazing voice. His soothing tones in both falsetto and natural vocals are paired perfectly well together in harmonies that bring each song to a new level of solid sound. The record is romantic, charming, spacey, relaxing, upbeat, energizing, trippy, and super soulful all at the same time.
Great quote, man. Great quote.
Yeah. Thanks, Finn.
And it speaks to what you said about Claude, especially of like the Ween guys. He's the professional.
Yeah, you're right. And that's no diss on anyone else, by the way.
No.
That's more just speaking about Claude. But yeah, dude. So, I think that's really sums it up for Laughing Hearts. And it's a great album, dude. It's out there on vinyl and CD, and people should get it.
Love the album.
I just feel like that quote just really encapsulates everything about Amandla. I feel like if you're into Ween, there's absolutely no reason why you should go out and get Claude's solo projects. They're awesome. It's not Ween, and you're not going to get the same thing you get with Ween. It's drawing from different sources of music. And then knowing that he's produced 3 albums in 20 years, it's like obviously he takes a lot of time to do the work for it because it's his solo project and he's doing all the work, but he's also trying to fit it in between everything else he's doing.
Right. I mean, you can tell, especially around the times that the records come out and the tour dates that you can find, it's in between, Ween tours basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Which makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's tough. It's tough to find time, I'm sure, for him,
Yeah. Anyway, everybody, that's Amandla in a nutshell. We love you, Claude. We love you, Claude. You're awesome.
Love you, Claude. If there's anybody out there, again, who hasn't heard this stuff, come on. You have to hook yourself up, If we've enlightened you to, a song or two on this episode, hey, man, just grab all 3 of the records. You won't be disappointed.
Great, man. Well, everybody, thanks for listening and have a great night or day. Have a great life. Do your best.
Hey, thanks for listening to another Weencast, and thanks for sticking with us. We love you.
All right, guys. Everybody, peace.
Peace.